بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمده تعالى ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. أيها المشاهدون الأفاضل، مرحبا بكم في قناة MTA، القناة الإسلامية الأحمدية، في لقاء مع العرب. لقد شرفنا أمير المؤمنين بعد أن كان في جولة في ألمانيا وبلجيكا وهولندا استغرقت 3 أسابيع، حيث تفقد أحوال الجماعة هناك وحضر الجلسة السنوية للجماعة الأحمدية في ألمانيا. وها هو الحمد لله معنا سالما غانما في لقاء جديد مع العرب.
Assalamu alaikum. We were wondering about you and missing you. Alhamdulillah.
أعتقد أن السؤال المناسب في هذه الحالة أن نعرف من أمير المؤمنين ماذا يقال عن هذه الجولة وماذا رأى حضرته هناك، لنخبر الإخوة في أنحاء العالم عن هذه الجولة. يسفضل.
First of all, I'll like to share my pleasure and deep sense of gratitude to Allah for this tour, which I consider a very successful tour in so many ways. We conveyed the message of Islam to a large number of Germans. Some of them hail from highly educated sections of society. I visited a university town, for instance. There were scholars of all sorts, scientists, other academicians, professors, students alike. There was a full hall and very responsive to the answers concerning Islam. And in other places also, in the main conference, there was a special meeting organized for the Germans, and there too we find very responsive. And also the same happened in another township, which is difficult to pronounce for me, but the Germans said Köln, but we call it Köln. So whenever I try to pronounce it, I fail. It's CO with some oblique over there, yes. And they pronounce it Köln. So this in Köln also, this is very close to the capital of Germany, and the gathering was very educated and religious also. Some of them were Catholics, and they all again responded so well. One thing which I observed was that the major obstruction or obstacle in the way of these people accepting Islam is the mullah, the orthodox, the so-called medieval or whatever name you give. Their stance from the point of view of Islam to the rest of the world is so rigid and so narrow-minded that the world which has come out of these old prejudices, etc., and is growing out of those, can't be called back to the same old dark age of prejudices. That is the main problem. Everywhere, all the questions were not addressed against Islam, but against the interpretation of Islam as presented by the extremists in Syria, in Iran, in Libya, elsewhere, in Pakistan, Afghanistan, everywhere. So whenever they attacked that Islam, I said, you are attacking the wrong place and addressing the wrong men. I have not come to represent them. I have come to represent the Islam of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the Islam of the Holy Quran, and this is what they have to say on this issue. They were always amazed. They always responded with great not only kindness but with enthusiasm in many a time. And many baths were effected with the grace of Allah from among the German people. So I see the new possibilities arising and opening up, doors opening up, new avenues not only in the West, in Germany, but elsewhere also. They are hearing the stories maligning Islam from their media, but they have courage and honesty enough when they see a different picture with their own eyes, they discredit what they hear and believe what they see. So, لَيْسَ الْخَبَرُ كَالْمُعَايَنَةِ, you know, that they are a living symbol of that. And as such, I have told Ahmadis now to broaden their contact with them, with the grace of Allah. And inshallah, Islam will win its battle, but not the mullah. Mullah's days are counted. The world is awakening, and even the world of Islam, the educated world of Islam, is growing out of mullahism. Only those are held back which have some crooked thinking, and you know, some people have ignorance in themselves, built-in ignorance. You can't do anything about them.
Okay. أمير المؤمنين يحيي السادة المشاهدين ويقول أن الحمد لله أن الله سبحانه وتعالى وفقني في هذه الجولة الناجحة في ألمانيا وهولندا وبلجيكا، ويقول لقد أبلغنا رسالة الإسلام في هذه المناطق، وكانت هناك لقاءات مع أنواع متعددة من الخلفيات، هناك الجامعيين والأساتذة والعلماء وغيرهم، وكان هناك أيضا عامة الناس. ويقول حضرته أن الاستجابة كانت استجابة طيبة، كانوا يتفهمون ما يقال لهم. ويقول أنه حضر أيضا بعض رجال الدين أو بعض المنتسبين إلى الكاثوليكية، وتبين لحضرته أن العقبة التي تقف في طريق هؤلاء الناس وقبول الإسلام هم الملات أو المشايخ الذين يمثلون العصور الوسطى، أيام الظلام، أيام الجهالة، أيام التعصب، وأن هؤلاء الناس بتصلبهم وبضيق أفقهم وبتعصبهم يطردون الناس بعيدا عن الإسلام. يقول حضرته أنني لم أتلقى أي أسئلة ضد الإسلام، وإنما الأسئلة كانت عن تصرفات وأفكار هؤلاء المشايخ، فقلت لهم إنكم تسألون الشخص غير مناسب لهذا الموضوع، أنا لم آتي لأمثلهم أو لأكون واحدا منهم، لا، أنا جئت لأمثل الإسلام الذي جاء به محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. ليس هذا الإسلام الذي تخلف في العصور الوسطى على يد هؤلاء الشيوخ وهؤلاء ورثتهم الذين ورثوا تصلب الرأس وضيق الأفق وعدم النظر والتفكر في تعاليم الإسلام. يقول حضرته أن كانت هناك بيعات كثيرة، وأنه رأى الأبواب والطرق المؤدية إلى الإسلام الحمد لله مفتوحة ومتيسرة، وأن أيام هؤلاء الملات أو هؤلاء الشيوخ أصبحت معدودة، إنهم يتمسكون بماض ولكن هذا كله زائل، الناس تفتحت فيهم العقول وأصبحوا يفكرون. يقول حضرته أن هؤلاء الأوروبيين يسمعون من أجهزة الإعلام عندهم ما يسيء إلى الإسلام، ولكنهم عندما يستمعون إلى ما يقوله أمير المؤمنين فإنهم ينبذون ما سمعوه ويعتمدون على ما رأوه بأعينهم. وهذه فكرة طيبة، لأن ليس المعاينة كالسمع، الإنسان عندما يسمع شيء لا يأخذ صورة صحيحة عن الشيء، ولكنه عندما يراه بنفسه ويناقشه ويبحثه فإن الصورة تتضح هل هي صورة حقيقية أم لا. ثم قال حضرته أنه طلب من الإخوة الأحمديين في أوروبا بناء على هذه المشاهدات أن يوسعوا علاقاتهم مع الأوروبيين، مع الألمان والهولنديين والبلجيك وكافة الأوروبيين، وإن شاء الله سوف تفتح هذه الأبواب لدخول هؤلاء الناس في الإسلام.
Now another hurdle which I discovered, which I knew but I again came into contact with, was the hurdle presented by the general moral condition of the Muslims who visit some European countries, from Turkey, from Iran, from Al-Maghrib, etc., etc. And Indonesia, no, that's not a problem. Bangladesh, Pakistan, India. These countries present a major problem because most of the common people, not the ulama, the common people who come from there, they're ignorant. Most of them are. They don't know anything about Islam, its values, its character. What they hear from the mullah, that is Islam according to them, and that is enough. The mullah is important when they're born, mullah is important when they die, and when they marry, you know. So that is all Islam there is to them. So they can't break away from the mullah. And mullah still holds a power over them for creating troubles, riots, problems for the countries where they live in. This is a very grave problem. The result is that the governments fed up with these groups, get fed up with these groups, and they watch them with suspicion. Among them are terrorists. Among them are opium smugglers and drug smugglers. And among them are those who pickpocket and do other small petty crimes here and there. The image of Muslims, the real image of Muslims, is also so bad, so tarnished, so ugly looking. So what is a religion to somebody? Either the ideology or the example of the people. On both these counts, unfortunately, we have failed to deliver the message of Islam in a manner that should be acceptable to them. We should attract them to Islam. Rather, they are repulsed on both counts. In ideology, they see the ideology of the mullah, of the medieval age, you know, who still lives in darkness and wants to bring them from light to darkness. They would refuse to do that. Nobody is ready to do that. Only the crooked ones, some of them. Distorted images, who will accept any cults. They are the only people who just trickle through the society into Islam, but don't remain there as permanent fixtures, come and go. But the major problem is the one which I'm just discussing. Ideologically, the mullah is the main curse in the path of Islam. And in the practical example, the common run of the people who come from third world countries, from poorer countries, their behavior, their example, their habits of trade and living do not attract these people, rather repulse them. And when they react in groups, whenever the government hardens their attitude against some of the criminal groups, then they move in groups and respond in groups. And the mullahs agitate them. They say, look here, this is what has happened. So riots take place, other problems happen. They begin to burn places and houses and get shot down in response. But the whole atmosphere is so ugly, and the negative propaganda carried out in the West because of these things is so damaging to the image of Islam that we find it very difficult to fight the battle between the two and still win converts from the European society.
يقول أمير المؤمنين أن من بين الصعوبات التي تواجهنا في الدعوة إلى الإسلام في أوروبا، وهذه حقيقة أعرفها من قبل ولكنها كل يوم تزداد ظهورا في هذه الأيام، هو هؤلاء المسلمين الذين يأتون من بلاد العالم الثالث، وهؤلاء لهم أخلاقيات خاصة، وهم معلوماتهم عن الدين هي التي يقولها لهم المشايخ. فهم مثلا الذين يأتون من تركيا أو من إيران أو من بلاد المغرب أو من بنغلاديش، باكستان، الهند، أعدادهم كبيرة ويحملون معهم شيوخهم، يأتون معهم في هذه الهجرات، وهم يعرفون هؤلاء الشيوخ ومرتبطون بهم. عندما يولد الطفل يحتاجون إلى الشيخ، عندما يموت الإنسان يحتاجون إلى الشيخ، عندما يتزوج إذن هم يحتاجون الشيخ في هذه الأحوال. أما معلوماتهم عن الدين وأخلاقيات الدين فهي منعدمة، يعتمدون اعتمادا كليا على ما يقوله الشيخ في مثل هذه المناسبات، ولكن قلوبهم ليست متعلقة بالدين. هؤلاء الناس أخلاقياتهم تنقل صورة سيئة عن الإسلام للأوروبيين، لأن من هؤلاء الناس تجد النشالين الذين يرتكبون جرائم الخطف وهذه الأشياء، تهريب المخدرات، بعض تصرفات من الإرهاب، يسيرون ويتصرفون جماعات تحت قيادة هؤلاء الشيوخ، وأحيانا يحدثون بعض الفتن هنا وهناك وأحداث العنف. هؤلاء الناس لا يفهمون شيء في الدين، ولا يصعب جدا يعني استقطابهم نحو الإسلام والمفاهيم الصحيحة. يقول إن الأوروبيين معذورون. لماذا؟ أن الدين بالنسبة لهم إما أن يكون عقيدة، فكرة يطلع عليها، أو تصرفات هؤلاء الناس الذين ينتسبون إلى الدين. وللأسف الأفكار والعقائد عند هؤلاء الناس معدومة، وهي يستقونها من عند المشايخ، وهي تمثل عصور الظلام والعصور الوسطى. الأخلاقيات والسلوك هم كأسوأ ما يكون، لأنه مستواهم العلمي والثقافي منحط، وفي نفس الوقت ليس هناك دين يعصمهم ويجعلهم يتخلقون بأخلاق الإسلام. فالصورة التي يراها الأوروبيون من هؤلاء الناس عن الإسلام صورة للأسف سيئة ومشوهة، بل إن الحكومة أو الحكومات تنظر إليهم بعين الريبة. هؤلاء الناس وهذا النوع من الناس يسبب مشكلة وصعوبة في نشر الإسلام الطاهر النقي في وسط هؤلاء الأوروبيين.
Again, there are people from Algeria or some extremists from other Muslim countries who make the European countries the seats of their protests, the platform for their protests. Particularly this happens in France, and many groups are organized by Algerians particularly, which indulge in all sorts of first of all antisocial activities and drug smuggling, etc. But far more than that, they collect arms, ammunition, either to smuggle back to their countries or sometimes to explode here in various places as a form of protest. This particularly has annoyed the French people and the government against most these Algerians against Islam. So every other day there are television programs which transfer the blame of the character of a certain people to that of a religion which has nothing to do with that character. But again they forget, and which this I have been attempting to tell them many a time, that largely they are responsible for this. For whatever they have made of Algeria, they are responsible for it. They have treated them so long with such cruelty as no European nation ever treated her subjects elsewhere in the colonies. The French have been totally merciless, without the least human values, in crushing the masses in Algeria who fought for their liberty. So that a wave of reaction grew from within France, and de Gaulle was born first of all out of the first movement of cruelty, oppression, suppression. But when he failed, when he knew previously the governments had failed, when they said nobody can destroy the spirit of freedom of these people, then they thought, how long can we do it? How far we can go? Already we have suffered enough. We have earned a bad name in the whole world. So it was de Gaulle who put his foot down ultimately. And because of his great popularity erstwhile, before that, during the war, he somehow managed to enforce his decision upon the people of France, and the freedom was, as you know, granted to Algeria at last. But during this struggle, they knew nothing but rebellion. They were trained in rebellion. They were trained in suffering and rising against their masters. So when the masters changed, still they are the same people. And all this long suppression of the people of France has resulted in their being hardy in suffering and cruel in rebellion. So these are the two things which make Algeria suffer so much. The Muslim rulers of Algeria, the Muslim people of Algeria, who are moderate in their attitude, they are targeted by these people in their own country and in the name of Islam. And then they shift the venue to France, and there they display all these fireworks, with the result that they earn a very bad name. That is why, despite there being a common market, despite there being an agreement whereby the barriers of customs, etc., are lifted, immigration officers are no longer present on the borders anywhere in the common market except in France. You see, whenever you try to enter France, you suffer so much at the hands of the French officials there. They treat every Muslim, every one person coming from a Muslim country, as third-rate people, as people from whom they could discover opium or contraband material of this side or that side, but weapons, explosives, etc. So go through thorough search. And despite the fact that in Europe, elsewhere, there are no border checks at all left. The whole barriers are lifted. But there is police, there is army standing in line as if an invasion has taken place, which in turn earns France a very bad reputation. The whole image of France is destroyed as they try to be over cautious maybe, but in practice what they do is they are over cruel and over crude in their treatment of foreigners. And they don't seem to have any common sense to differentiate. While I know in the British immigration and other immigrations, there are officers who are so clever in judging persons from their faces, their style, that they look at you and say, okay, like pass. They look at you and say, please, wait there. And of course, it's for a human to err, to make mistakes. But they do it very rarely. Once I saw a car having been stopped, and they started dismembering it part by part until they opened up the tires, and the tires were filled not only with air but also with drugs. We saw them, we couldn't stay very long seeing the whole operation, but when we saw these things and somebody pointed out, said, look here, this is what we have done, and we discovered drugs from within the tires.
Where was that, Hazur?
Pardon?
Where was that?
Leave it.
Okay.
Somewhere. I mean, I'm not very clear
yes.
exactly.
Oh.
Perhaps it was in England, but I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
Probably it was. But they did it. Now, the person was so clever, he knew that the dogs have a very acute sense of smell of drugs, and they're trained on that. So they do it everywhere. But perhaps he thought that the tires are too thick and too tightly controlled, not a jot of air is permitted out. So dogs would fail to do it. Dogs did, but the human intelligence didn't, you know. So once they know somebody is suspect, they go thoroughly after him. But normally, ordinary citizens, decent people, they're never bothered by these people. Everywhere in Europe, I found the same, but in France. The police is so thick-headed and so trained in, you know, being unjust to non-French. It's very cruel. This is my long experience, not new. Somehow, you know, I used to pay them compliments that you remind me of my police, my country, you know. They're great people. They have the same methods, but with one difference. Pakistani police is far more intelligent than the French police, in my opinion. Because when the foreigners come, they know how to respect them. They also very cleverly differentiate between the right man and the wrong man. And they know how to show respect to the right people. They are hardened against criminals. They treat them very in a rough, shoddy way, I know that. Sometimes they become extremely cruel to them. But they generally try to create a difference between the right and the wrong. Not so in France. My first experience with France was in 1956, when you were not born. Hilmi Sahib was a small child.
I was married.
Already married?
Oh, with children.
In 56?
Yes, sir. I'm married in
He is a very young old man.
48.
MashaAllah. And you were born in?
29.
Is that right?
3 months after Hudur.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. I must pay you a compliment for your youth and
Thank you.
vigor. Huh? But anyway, except for this, otherwise I'm right. I know you were not born. Now there we went in an old car. You don't mind my deviating from this strict answer to the question and deviating to other paths. It's as brings color to the discussion.
Yes, Hudur.
I was a student in England at the University of London, in the Oriental School of Study, SOS, it's called SOS. But study was not something which I was interested in. I was interested in studying the things of my choice, going out, meeting people, going to Europe, which I didn't do much, but I did. So I traveled to Europe, and there I had a very old car. A car which even then, by their standard, in old standards, was very old. In 1956, I was driving a car to Europe made in 1933. Morris Minor. And Morris 10 it was called. Not Minor, Morris 10. Very sturdy car, very tough. But also very faithful. It only created problems when we reached our destination or as we were about to start. Never on the way. Not once. Always after arrival or before start. Only once in Ostend, Belgium. It happened that it started misbehaving on the way, and I told my companions, Mahmoud, Nasir, etc. And so far, God has been so kind to us that this car never gives me trouble, even in England when I used it, during the journey. Only when the aid is next available, only that happens. But my car, this generator had gone kaput, it finished, Suddenly it burnt out. So I told them there has to be some aid around. So let's see. I had trust in Allah that He would not abandon us like this. So I walked a few 100 meters in front because I noticed a small shop. In those days there still were small mechanic shops available in Europe. Now it's completely changed. You have to go to big companies and things. No small vendor-like shop here is available anymore. But there was an old shop. And I went to him, and he couldn't speak anything. I couldn't speak any French, Belgian or what they call. It's either French or
Flemish.
No, Hollandish language, Flemish. So all I knew was kaput, and all he understood was kaput. So I said, car kaput, come on. Huh? So he came and saw it and said, generator, he took kaput. I said, all right, take it. So he took it out, and then I think we got some help somewhere. Translator was available, so we could converse a little bit, some in signs, some with the help. And he told me the story was that this generator was completely burnt out, and it's because it's an old model. You can't have it replaced here in France anywhere. But, he said, you're fortunate to have come here and where this generator has gone out of order. Because many years ago, an Englishman brought his car, which was not Morris, but another car made by the same company, which Hazrat Sahib had, you remember? Mrs. Salis. You remember the name? Anyway, it was made by the same company, sister car, and he said that he had a spare generator with him. He left the old one, which was still in working order, but I repaired it and kept it. And he got the one replaced and went away. So I must have put it somewhere here. So he started, you know, lifting the junk from here and throwing things. And from under the heap, that generator was recovered. It was called dynamo, you know. We call it generator now. So that dynamo was discovered. And he polished it and dusted it, and it was in working condition, imagine. And it fitted. Woolsey was this. Not Woolsey, Woolsey. Woolsey is the sister car of Morris. And that had the generator exactly the same size and same make. So he fitted it, and then we were on the way. So it never happened that my car broke down at a wrong place. Of all the European countries I visited, this was the only spot where I could get this. There it was. It was not the car, it was the angels who were guiding this tour, because we were always praying and seeking for help. So now, the story I must come to. When in Paris, as I told you, the car broke down, and we were waiting for repair, etc., in a street of Paris. Now there, we slept in the car because we had run out of money. And we were waiting for the, you know, there was, Saturday was holiday, Sunday was holiday, Monday was Whit's Monday, which was again a holiday. So we had to wait there for 3 days before we could get money from our bank in England. So that is why we practically lived on, you know, survived on small food, and we couldn't go to any accommodation, any hotel, any restaurant. So we slept in the car those 3 days. So in the middle of the night, I thought it was jerking, making movements. And I looked around, and I saw that my carrier behind, in those days it was not, the diggy system was not yet invented, you know. In 1933, there were no diggies. There was open something, you pull it, a frame-like thing, a carrier, and you bind the things with it with ropes. So that is how we were traveling. So somebody had cut the rope and was walking away with my bag and with something else. And I saw these two boys, why they were walking away, because by the time I woke up, they had already finished the job and they were moving in front. And they were both white people. No shadow of doubt. They were French young vagabonds. And when they saw me, I came out of the door, they started running. So I ran after them. And when they saw that I wouldn't leave them alone, because I was young and I could run quite fast, and they were also loaded with this. So they made a very clever device. One of them took a street moving on the right side, going into the right, and the other took a street into the left. And left the bag there. Now, it was a clever game, I must say, because they thought if he took the bag, then we are saved, he can't catch us. If he followed us, the other person may return and run away with the bag, and we will say, we have no bag. Whom are you catching, you know, that sort of thing. So the person would have decamped with the money. This is what I thought they had in mind. So after chasing him for a while, I returned to my bag and said, Alhamdulillah, I get my bag, and I came back, and then I made the mistake of going to the police. That was my first mistake and last mistake perhaps in France. they started inquiring, they started investigating me. They kept me in the police station for almost till morning, 3 hours of the night. And, they drilled me with the question as if I was the suspect. So I showed them the place, the way that it was cut, the luggage that was taken away and then brought back by me. And then they said, all right, sign this statement. I didn't know French. They said, tell me the English translation. The statement said that I saw and recognized 2 Algerians. And it was broadly lit street, so I couldn't have missed it. I know they were Algerians, so they ran away and they did this. I said, I'm not going to sign it, because I saw them to be 2 Frenchmen. They said, all right, then you keep sitting here. They almost mentally tortured me. I said, no way am I going to sign. At last some big officer came in the morning and he said, okay, no, go ahead, go back. You have got your luggage? I said, yes, okay, go ahead, it's okay, enough. But then I remember, first it was my first brush with the French police, and I knew they were prejudiced and very unfortunately very harsh. So if the Algerians are doing these things, it's not good. They shouldn't do that. I don't approve of that. I must say France has a share in it to play. So the damage to the image of Islam in France particularly is done by this misbehavior. So whatever the background, I must advise all the Muslims, they should be true to Islam. They shouldn't take their revenge against a people from Islam. What they're doing is simply this. When they misbehave in a different country, even if there is a history of their oppression, what the people would interpret would not be that you are a product of their past aggression and oppression. They simply attribute your misbehavior to Islam. So this is, these are the reasons what I noticed again and again, this time also very particularly, which stand in the way of the acceptance of Islam. Otherwise, the hearts are really inclined. Minds are opening, hearts are opening, and people want something as simple and logical and convincing as true as Islam is. Thank you.
يبين أمير المؤمنين أن هناك أيضا عقبة من العقبات التي تقف في وجه الإسلام في أوروبا وفي فرنسا بصفة خاصة، وهو أن هناك بعض الأشخاص القادمين من بلاد عربية إسلامية وبالذات من الجزائر يجعلون مراكز اعتراضهم في فرنسا في أوروبا، ويقومون بأعمال مضادة للمجتمع مثل جمع السلاح وتهريب السلاح ووضع القنابل في هذه المحطات التي تحت الأرض وفي كثير من هذه الأماكن. هذه الأعمال ضايقت الحكومة الفرنسية بالطبع، ونسبوا هذا إلى الدين، وهذا العمل لا علاقة له بالدين. ولكن يقول أمير المؤمنين أنا حاولت أن أبين للأوروبيين بكل ما استطعت في كل المناسبات أن هؤلاء الناس يقومون بهذه الأفعال نتيجة رد فعل لما قام به الفرنسيون أثناء احتلالهم للجزائر مع الجزائريين. كانوا يتعاملون معهم بدون رحمة، وكانوا في غاية القسوة والكبت، تربت الأجيال، ربما هذا الجيل والذي قبله والذي قبله، على هذا النوع من المعاملة، فولدت في نفوسهم قدرة شديدة على التحمل والصبر، وفي نفس الوقت الشدة في الانتقام والتمرد بكل عنف ممكن. كانوا يفعلون ذلك ضد الفرنسيين وهم يحتلون بلادهم. فلما خرج الفرنسيون تغير السادة وجاء سادة جدد استخدموا نفس الأسلوب مع هؤلاء، رغم الفارق الكبير بين ما يفعله الحكام الجزائريين الحاليين وما كان يفعله الفرنسيون، ولكنهم تعودوا على المعارضة بهذه الشدة وبهذا العنف. يقول أمير المؤمنين أن أوروبا كلها أزالت الحواجز، لم يعد هناك حاجز في أوروبا تستطيع أن تنتقل من بلد إلى بلد، ليس هناك جمارك ولا جوازات ولا مثل هذه الإجراءات، ما عدا فرنسا. فرنسا فقط هي التي شذت لمعاملة هؤلاء الجزائر، أو بسبب هؤلاء الجزائريين الذين يقومون بمثل هذه الأفعال، وهذا أيضا سبب رد فعل سيء في بلاد أوروبا وأساء سمعة فرنسا لأنها تبدو متشددة أكثر من اللازم. يقول أمير المؤمنين أن الشرطة في أوروبا أذكياء، الذين يقفون على هذه البوابات يستطيعون بالنظرة أن يميزوا بين الشخص والآخر، فعادة يتركون الناس، ولكن إذا اشتبه في إنسان فإنه يوقفه ثم يتخذ معه الإجراءات. وفي كل الحالات أو في معظم الحالات عندما يشتبهون يكون اشتباههم في محله. فيقول حضرتك أننا رأينا مرة أنهم يفككون السيارة إلى أجزائها، حتى هذا الإطار الكاوتش فإنهم فتحوه ووجدوه مملوءا بالمخدرات. ممكن أي إنسان قد يخطئ، ولكن هؤلاء يتعاملون مع الذين يزورون باحترام، ولكن الفرنسيين معروفون بغير ذلك، هم لا يتعاملون. يقول أنني يذكرونني بالشرطة والجمارك في باكستان، ولكن في باكستان أذكى من هؤلاء. طبعا هناك سوء المعاملة بالنسبة للأشخاص العاديين، ولكنهم مع الضيوف ومع السواح يكونوا يظهرون الأدب والتهذيب. أما هؤلاء الفرنسيين فإنهم لا تبدو منهم مثل هذا الذكاء ولا مثل هذا التصرف، وإنما هم دائما متشددون ويعاملون الناس معاملة عنيفة. يقول حضرته أنني كانت لي تجربة مع هؤلاء الناس منذ فترة بعيدة، منذ عام 1956 عندما كنت طالبا أدرس في جامعة لندن قسم الدراسات الشرقية، وكنت في ذلك الوقت في العشرينات من عمري، ولم أكن أهتم بالدراسة الأكاديمية بقدر اهتمامي بمقابلة الناس واختيار الموضوعات التي تروق لي والتي أرى أنها تفيدني في هذه النواحي. في إحدى رحلاتي من بريطانيا إلى فرنسا كانت معي سيارة قديمة موريس موديل 32 أو 33. يقول هي سيارة قديمة جدا ولكنها مخلصة، بمعنى أنها لا تتعطل إلا إذا كنا سنبدأ السير أو عندما نصل في نهاية المطاف، لا تتعطل في الطريق. كانت تحس أننا في الطريق لن نجد من يصلحها، فلا تتعطل إلا في نهاية الطريق. ويضرب حضرته مثل لهذا
إلا except one is sustained
in Belgium. نعم. إلا في مرة في بلجيكا فتعطلت هذه السيارة، وتبين أن الدينامو أو مولد الكهرباء في السيارة قد احترق.
It's called dynamo؟
نعم دينامو. نستخدم نفس الكلمة. وسار حضرته قليلا حتى وجد محل ميكانيكي صغير في قرية قريبة، وهناك قال هو لا يعرف لغته.
قرية قريبة،
محلات في الطريق.
No, it was main road.
نعم.
There was no dwelling nowhere.
نعم.
But somehow this was the single place.
نعم.
Which nowadays is not found, but
نعم.
in those days you could see.
يقول حضرته أنها ليست قرية، وإنما في الطريق العام السريع كان يوجد محلات لإصلاح السيارات وتزويدها ببعض الخدمات هذه، فكان هذا أحد هذه المحلات. فطلبت من الرجل أن يأتي معي بالإشارة لأني لا أعرف لغته ولا يعرف لغتي، وذهبنا فعرف أن الدينامو محترق فأخذه، ووجد عنده دينامو آخر كان قد تركه أحد الزوار الإنجليز الذي كان عنده دينامو احتياطي وترك له هذا، فأصلحه وتركه في معداته. فبالصدفة جاءت هذه السيارة واحتاجت هذا الدينامو فأخذه وركبه وسارت السيارة. يقول حضرته أنني في باريس أيضا تعطلت السيارة، كنا في باريس وهذا يتفق مع إخلاص السيارة، ولكن هذا العطل كان في يوم سبت، فلا بد وأنهم يحتاجون إلى نقود لإصلاح السيارة وليذهبوا إلى فندق، فلم يكن هناك نقود وليست هناك طريقة للحصول على نقود من البنك، لأن السبت الأحد والاثنين كان يوم عطلة أيضا لمناسبة، فكان هناك قحط في النقود، فاضطروا هو ورفيقه للنوم في السيارة. وبعد ذلك أحس وهو نائم،
The two رفقاء. Not one
كان
رفيق.
معه رفيقان،
young boy students.
نعم. كانوا شبان مع بعض يجوبون هذه الأماكن. فأحس بحركة خارج السيارة فتنبه، فإذا طبعا لم يكن هناك الأجهزة والشنطة الخلفية للسيارة، وإنما كانت الحقائب موضوعة ومربوطة بحبل. فيبدو أن بعض هؤلاء اللصوص قطعوا الحبل وأخذوا الحقيبة وبدأوا يفرون بها، فأحس بهم حضور وأسرع خلفهم. ولما كان شابا، فلما لاحظوا أنه مصر على مطاردتهم وهذه الحقيبة ثقيلة لا يستطيعون السير، يقول حضرته أنهم لجأ إلى فكرة ذكية، أنهم ترك الحقيبة وأسرع كل منهم في طريق حتى لا أستطيع أن أتابع الاثنين، فإذا تبعت أحدهم يعود الآخر ليأخذ الحقيبة. ولكنني جريت مسافة قصيرة وعدت إلى حقيبتي ورجعت، ثم ارتكبت الخطأ الأول والأخير في فرنسا. ما هو الخطأ؟ أنه ذهب إلى الشرطة ليقدم تقريرا عن هذه الحادثة. يقول أمير المؤمنين: أنا رأيت هذين الشابين وهما فرنسيان من هؤلاء الشباب الذي يجوب الشوارع ويفعل هذه الأشياء. فذهبت إلى الشرطة فأخذوا يستجوبونني 3 ساعات في الليل، وكأنني أنا الذي ارتكبت جريمة، وطال استجوابهم وأسئلتهم. وفي النهاية قدموا إلي ورقة يقولون وقع عليها. فقلت: ما في هذه الورقة؟ قالوا: أنك رأيت اللصوص وهما جزائريين. فقال: لا، هم ليسوا من الجزائريين، أنا رأيتهم هم بيض من الأوروبيين. فقالوا: لا، إذن تبقى. قال: لا يمكن أن أغير شهادتي، هذا ما رأيته. فمكث حتى جاء الصباح وحضر أحد الضباط الكبار ثم صرفه وقال: أنت وجدت حقيبتك؟ الحمد لله، وصرفه. يقول أن هذا أنا أقول الحمد لله، أقول أنا الذي قلت الحمد لله، ليس هذا الرجل. المهم أن هذا الدرس يبين أن هؤلاء الناس في قلوبهم تحيز ضد الجزائريين. هذه جريمة انتهت في الطريق، لماذا يريد أن ينسبها إلى جزائريين؟ لا يريد أن ينسبها إلى الفرنسيين. فهذا يبين طبيعة نظرتهم وموقفهم نحو الجزائريين. على أي حال، هذا الذي يحدث من الإخوة الجزائريين لا يخدم القضية الوطنية، ولا يخدم القضية الإسلامية، ولا يحدث ضررا كبيرا في الفرنسيين، وإنما يشوه صورة الإسلام ويشوه صورة الجزائريين. ولذلك نصيحتي لهم جميعا أنه بالرغم من هذه الخلفية القديمة، وبالرغم من أن فرنسا ومعاملتها السابقة هي التي أحدثت هذه الأمور في نفوسهم، إلا أنه يجب أن ينظروا إلى القضية الأكبر من هذا. القضية الكبرى هي قضية الإسلام، وقضيتهم أيضا قضية الشعوب. هذه الشعوب لماذا نسيء إلى سمعتهم في العالم بهذه الطريقة ونسبب المضايقات لهم ولغيرهم في هذا الوقت؟ فيجب أن نغير طريقتنا في التفكير والتعامل، ولا ننتقم بهذه الطريقة، لأنها غير فعالة في مضايقتهم، وإنما هي فعالة في تشويه صورة الإسلام.
Now I will come to another issue now. Among our activities, it was a very busy tour with the grace of Allah. Among our activities was to meet different ethnic groups. There are a large number of Turkish people, Arabs from different countries, Africans of different origin, Albanians, both from Albania and Kosovo, and Bosnians in large number, of course, and then other East European people, but particularly those from Macedonia. The British pronounce it Macedonia, but in Urdu we say Makhdunia, and Arabic also Makhdunia, and they themselves call it Macedonia. So the correct pronunciation is really Macedonia, not Macedonia, but anyway, in English say it Macedonia. They are a very large community in Germany in particular. And also, similarly in Belgium, all different groups, as I have just mentioned, come. So I had a meeting in some places with separate ethnic groups. With Macedonian separate meeting, Albanian separate meeting, Albanian and Bosnians together, but both translations were done. And also the Turkish people, African, particularly from the Francophone countries where they speak French, like next to
Senegal?
no, Benin. Benin is a country, and Togo is the country next to them, and they all speak French. So we had very successful meetings, large meetings with all these first groups. And the Jamaat Germany had organized things beautifully. It's a very large number of Ahmadis totally dedicated to the task of conveying the message of Islam and message of Ahmadiyya, the true Islam, to all the people who share their country with them, or the hospitality of Germany. So we did a lot of work, and I was available for hours in their company to answer any questions they asked. And with the grace of Allah, the response was very good. In one Bosnian session, for instance, around 500 some baths were affected. And similarly everywhere after that, people themselves desired. They came forward and said, "You want to do bath now and here." So with the grace of Allah, overall it was a very successful session, but it was a compliment to the people themselves, and that is what I am reminding you again. The people are now in a mood to accept Islam and truth. Why I say Islam and truth, while it's one and the same thing? In the sense that whatever they have heard of Islam, they are ready to change when they see the truth of Islam, which is different from what they have heard before. So they're ready. And inshallah, we're going to deliver the goods. A revolution is on the way, we can say it. At the same time, the anti-Ahmadi element was fully active nowadays. Absolutely, at its very best, at its worst. They were trying to stop the passage of Ahmadiyya. But because the time is about to finish, I don't want to open up that story. You better translate this, and then maybe tomorrow inshallah we'll do that. Yes.
يقول أمير المؤمنين: ننتقل إلى نقطة أخرى من نقاط النشاط الذي قمنا به في هذه الجولة. إن جماعة ألمانيا في الواقع تقوم بجهود عظيمة جدا ونشاط مبارك في الدعوة وتبليغ الإسلام الحقيقي الأحمدية إلى كل الموجودين في ألمانيا، ولذلك نظموا مقابلات بين هؤلاء النوعيات المختلفة من الناس مع مولانا أمير المؤمنين. كان هناك جماعات عرقية من العرب، من الأفارقة، من الأتراك، من الألبان بنوعيهم، ومن مقدونيا التي ينطقون هنا مسيدونيا، وهناك أيضا هذه الجماعات أيضا موجودة في بلجيكا، ولكن نحن نتحدث الآن عما جرى في ألمانيا. يقول أمير المؤمنين أنني قضيت ساعات طويلة وقابلت أعدادا منهم. هذه الجماعات منفصلة، كل جماعة أو كل عرق في جلسة خاصة. وكان هناك من الأفارقة بالذات الذين يتكلمون الفرنسية مثل توغو وبنين وغيرها من بلاد أفريقيا. يقول حضرته أن الاستجابة كانت جيدة. مثلا في إحدى هذه الجلسات بعد الانتهاء من المحاورة تقدم أكثر من 500 شخص من البوسنة وأصروا على أن
ألبانيا
وألبانيا وأصروا على أن يبايعوا.
Some Arabs, there were some Turkish people, there were some Germans. So altogether it was around 600 or something, I don't remember exact, but definitely
يقول
many
حضرته
hundreds.
أنه من البوسنة ومن العرب ومن غيرهم ومن أفارقة مجموعهم الكلي يبلغ 600، وسوف نتحدث في هذه التفاصيل إن شاء الله عندما تأتي الأخبار الدقيقة. يقول حضرته أنه مع هذا المجهود الذي يقوم به الشباب والإخوة الأحمديين في ألمانيا، إلا أن أيضا لابد أن ننظر بنظرة الرضا عن هؤلاء الناس أنفسهم، لأنهم هم الذين أبدوا الرغبة وفي قبول الإسلام وقبول الحق. كأن الأعين قد تفتحت والقلوب الآن مستعدة لمعرفة الحقائق، رغم أن هؤلاء الناس بتأثير المشايخ يسمعون الكثير السيء عن الإسلام، ولكن برغم هذه الدعاية السيئة إلا أنهم هم بأنفسهم أقبلوا على الحق. عندما يستمعوا وعندما يعرفوا حقيقة الإسلام فإنهم على الفور يقبلون عليه. يقول حضرته أن أيضا العناصر المضادة الأحمدية تعمل بكل ما في طاقتها هذه الأيام، ولكن ما هي النتائج؟ الحمد لله النتائج هي في تسهل للأحمدية طريقها وتسهل للإسلام الاندفاع إلى طريقه، والحمد لله. وسوف نناقش هذا الموضوع في اللقاء القادم غدا بإذن الله، ونشكر مولانا أمير المؤمنين ونرحب بعودته إليكم مرة أخرى. شكرا لكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
السلام عليكم. جزاكم الله. And when you said all that, I was looking at him. I said, he has come back too. क्या हाल है आपकी उर्दू का? Alhamdulillah. He is a student of Urdu nowadays. You are also, and you have done very well in a very short time with the grace of Allah. Tell them.
هذا الأخ الشاب الجميل هذا يدرس اللغة الأردية في الفصول التي ينظمها أمير المؤمنين لتعليم اللغة الأردية ولتعليم الجماعة كيف يدرسون اللغات. وقد تقدم كثيرا. I see him making troubles in the kitchen down there in Urdu.
Excellent. MashaAllah. Assalamu alaikum.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.